My name's Scott Fishwick. I am National Technical Lead for the Air Quality Department of EMM Consulting. We are an independent consultant that's been engaged by Veolia to look at the air quality impacts from the project. I've got a Bachelor of Science in Atmospheric Science. I've been in air quality consulting for over 17 years, specialising in atmospheric dispersion modelling and air quality impact assessment. An air quality impact assessment is a detailed study of a source of emissions that follows EPA assessment guidelines and applies impact assessment criteria. The study will factor in local conditions such as meteorology, terrain and land cover, as well as project-specific emission rates to determine the potential for impact. So for the air quality impact assessment, we looked at three specific emission scenarios. First of all, we took real-world emissions data from an operating facility in the UK. We also accounted for any other emissions that are to be associated with the ARC project, such as truck movements, material handling. And in addition to that, we also included all approved existing sources at the Eco Precinct and the neighbouring Woodlawn mine to determine the potential total cumulative impacts from the Eco Precinct with the introduction of the ARC project. Local conditions were accounted for in the model through three-dimensional terrain datasets, land cover data and meteorological monitoring datasets from the on-site weather station at the Eco Precinct. This provided us with a site-specific model that allowed us to simulate the dispersion of emissions from the project in the local area. The dispersion modelling predicted that concentrations would be well below New South Wales EPA impact assessment criteria. EPA criteria is set for the protection of human health and well-being. In addition to comparison with EPA criteria, the predictions for existing operations relative to operations with the introduction of the project showed no significant change to ambient air quality. To illustrate this point, this graph presents a comparison between existing operations and operations with the introduction of the ARC project. The blue bars show concentrations from existing operations, the black bars show concentrations predicted from the introduction of the ARC project with existing operations. The graph shows that between the two scenarios presented, there is a negligible difference between the predicted concentrations, and all concentrations are well below the applicable EPA impact assessment criteria. To understand what would happen with the spike in emissions, we adopted the maximum recorded concentrations from a real-world operating facility. The predicted impacts were well below applicable EPA impact assessment criteria at all surrounding assessment locations, giving us confidence of what potential concentrations would be under a spike in emissions. So relative to background concentrations of the predicted impacts from the ARC project are very low. Relative to impacts from existing operations at the Eco Precinct, the introduction of the project would not significantly alter ambient air quality in the surrounding environment. If the project is approved, Veolia will be subject to very strict guidelines set by the New South Wales EPA and Department of Planning and Environment. As part of this conditions, there are strict emission concentration limits that need to be met and will be demonstrated through in-stack measurements of concentrations. In addition to in-stack measurements, Veolia will be required to establish real-time monitoring equipment in the surrounding community to understand impacts to ambient air quality and the environment.